What's up, everybody? Welcome to the science-based content creator tier list. Now, usually I make tier lists about exercise selection or some kind of training concept, so surely this one won't be controversial at all. So it's going to be a standard S through D type situation. S is phenomenal, just out of this world. A is pretty darn good, certainly worth following. B is pretty good, maybe they're not so special or they have some good takes, but also some crappy ones. C is like pretty mediocre, a lot of really bad takes, just maybe lacking in integrity or something. And then D is just bottom of the barrel. These people are just not good, just bad. So first, I'm going to give you a little bit of behind the scenes of how I rank or judge or rate someone. It's not just I like this person, I don't like this person's funny, this person linked a good study that confirms my biases. No, I'm trying to be as objective as possible here. So first, do they actually conduct research, and what is the quality of it? This is a small to maybe moderate ranking. I think what is much more important is your ability to communicate and to have integrity and honesty. Just because you did some research, it matters, but it's certainly not the most important thing. I think if someone has done research, they probably rank this really highly. But for me, it's not a big deal. If someone has never, ever conducted a study, not the end of the world. Next, their physique. Do they even lift? I think if someone is claiming to be a hypertrophy expert and they look like a beanpole, there's an issue there, but they don't have to look like an IFBB pro either. Number three, are they reasonable? Do they have nuance? Are they dogmatic? Do they have a lot of really hot takes that go off the beaten path? To me, this is a huge, huge factor. If someone is trying to be contrarian and they're just saying ridiculous stuff in order to get attention, that is just one of the biggest red flags out there. And they're not really science-based if that's the case. Number four, how do they react to criticism? Are they able to change their mind over time, especially if it hurts their bottom line? If they used to sell a supplement and then evidence came out saying it's not as effective and they stopped selling it, that's great. If they keep selling it, not good at all. They're not really science-based if they're only science-based until it impacts their livelihood. Is science being used as marketing? Are they up there in a lab coat with a stethoscope that doesn't even make sense? You're not a medical doctor. What? Okay, sure. Or do they have that love of science deep in their loins, right? Or is it just, hey, this is popular, I think we'll do this. So this can be a little bit hard to tell at times, but there are certainly some giveaways. If someone is over-interpreting research, or they're over-extrapolating things, they're always using mechanistic stuff, or they're being very, very aggressive with their call-outs, or trying to correct people, or trying to collab with people, is their main goal actually effectively communicating honest, scientific, helpful advice? Or are they just trying to make it big and get popular and become a celebrity and make lots of money, right? So those are two different paths. Maybe the stethoscope is for palpating the muscle, right? Like oh yeah, getting a good pump from the stethoscope gain. Now, no, there's no reason to have a stethoscope. Why do you have a stethoscope? That being said, if they are an actual doctor and they have a stethoscope, still a little bit weird, but a little bit less weird. Rage bait is probably the biggest one, where someone is just saying something to get people angry. They can't admit that's what they're doing, but often it's pretty darn obvious. If they are very contradictory with past and previous statements, again, it's okay and good to change your mind, but if you're going back and forth and just people have no idea what you stand for, superset's good, superset's bad, what is that? Red flag. Your opinion should change over time, but if you're just whipsawing and going back and forth, that's not good. Next, their educational background. It kind of matters a little bit, but it's not like someone is going to be S tier. Oh, but you're not a doctor. Oh, D tier. No, that's not really how things work. If you're a doctor or have a master's or something, that's good, but it's certainly not the most important thing by any means. Number seven, honesty, integrity, misinterpreting or misrepresenting studies or being deceptive. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone try to use a link to support their case, and then I go to that link and it has nothing to do with what they're saying, or it just doesn't support what they're saying, or it directly contradicts what they're saying. That happens all the time because they know most people are just not going to actually go click and look at that study. And that's certainly not the majority of science-based, evidence-based content creators, but if I see that more than a couple times from one person, it's really hard to trust what they say after that. Number eight, selling out. So if you're selling supplements that don't really have good evidence behind them, or in general, you're pushing products left and right that just don't have a lot of evidence for that, but you're claiming to be science-based, ooh, yeah, you're going to go down a tier or 2 or 3. Number 9, their practical experience. You do see some people who, they don't really lift weights. They don't coach people. I get the feeling that they don't spend a lot of time actually lifting. but they post a lot of research. And I think that their BS detector is often just not very finely tuned. If you have spent time in the gym, you have a lot of lifting wisdom, you talk to people, and you get an idea of what works and what doesn't, what is reasonable, what's not. And so when a study that comes out and contradicts that, you have just a little bit more of a wall between this is the thing. Well, maybe not. There could be some problem with the study, right? And then finally, someone's great to good to shitty take ratio. Yeah, we got a 3-way ratio here. It's okay when it's in a 3-way. Anyone can have a good take. Oh, calories matter. Progressive overload. That's what you got to do. Okay, that's nice. Thank you. But having a great take, something that is actually original, that no one has either thought of before or has said in that way. Some people say something that you know, but they say it in a way that actually makes a lot of sense and makes you think about it in a new light. That is a great take. On the other hand, there are a lot of shitty takes out there. And there's some people who they just have more shitty takes than great takes. And so that ratio is skewed to the point where they just can't be an S or A or B tier. They got to be below that. And away we go. So let's start with Geoff Nippard. Let's start with a big name. We're not going to start with a small name. That doesn't even make sense. Let's get the party started. So he has 6.6 million subscribers on YouTube, so a massive channel here. And I think he has done a great job with his platform. I can't agree with every single person that has been on his channel, but overall, he's very, very reasonable with recommendations. I feel like he's very, very careful with his language. Maybe a point of criticism is the stretch focus stuff. I think he got a little bit overexcited or maybe promoted those a little bit more, but then he went and did research and hey, turns out they're roughly the same with full range of motion. You could say maybe the technique on some of the exercises could have been a little bit more standardized. I know Kassem Hansen had his critiques of that, but overall, I think he's a fantastic source of information. His channel is mainstream for a reason. The quality of the content, the editing, the scripting, the writing, the research, everything is phenomenal. Nuanced, not dogmatic, hasn't sold out. Great physique, has competed in bodybuilding, powerlifting. No controversies here, apart from, something that was not his fault at all. So, and then the great to good to shitty take ratio is on point. So, yeah, S tier, easy S tier here. Next up, Dr. Andrew Huberman. Now, I watched a lot of his stuff during the pandemic. I can still hear the music of his intro. Around here, we use science and science-based tools. The trouble is, he is definitely a sellout, I would say. That's just my opinion. He is an ophthalmologist, and now he's selling these blue light blocking glasses that really don't have a lot of evidence behind them. Plus, they're extremely overpriced. You can get the same ones for a 20th of the price or something on Taobao. Just absolutely ridiculous. He also has a really bad case of expert creep, where he feels like he has to be an expert on every single topic. So he's asked about something, and then he has a hot take, which maybe doesn't have a lot of scientific evidence or any evidence at all behind it. And so, yeah, he's really into guru territory here. And I'm gonna have to say D tier on this one. But he's a doctor, and he has that sort of gray, bearded, haired, grizzled look that people really, really like. Very, very well spoken, very, very charismatic. Clearly does a lot of homework when it comes to preparation for his videos. But if you look at the stuff that matters, the integrity, the honesty, the AG1 sponsorships, it's got to be T tier. Next up, Ella, also known as ScientificSnitch. I think she's doing a lot of good work, but there are definitely some instances where her content is absolutely 100% rage bait, but she can't admit it because that kind of kills off the whole thing. We had a little bit of a back and forth about bulking. I think she chose some studies that were just not really good for the context and the things she was trying to use them for. I don't think she's a terrible source of information overall, but she certainly is prone to using needless amounts of jargon. And often I don't think the goal is to really communicate. It's just to sort of confuse people into asking questions and to drive engagement. I'm going to say currently C tier, but in a year or two, this could be A tier, right? If she cleans things up and stops with these kind of growth strategies, yeah, it could be A tier, could be S tier, who knows? Could also be D tier. So, but currently I'm going to say C tier. We did a debate on Jonathan Warren's channel. I don't dislike her as a person, but I know what she's doing, and I know she can't admit it, but it's also so clear that it's got to be C tier, at least for now. Next up, Dr. Eric Helms. I have followed Eric for probably the better part of a decade, essentially, since I started lifting. And I'm glad that I stumbled across his content. He's been a great source of information, as well as just guidance on how to conduct yourself in the fitness industry. I've watched probably hundreds of hours of him on various podcasts at this point, on Iron Culture, on the Mass Research Review, on the Team 3DMJ podcast. So he's hardworking, he's prolific. Oh, he's a professional bodybuilder, if that wasn't enough. I think he's great physique. He's still making improvements. Obviously, he's doing a ton of volume, but he knows how to push a set. That much is clear from just watching the work that he is doing. He is a doctor, but he doesn't mention it every other sentence, which is nice. He's basically a paladin. He's the lawful good paladin of the fitness industry, and I know he'll probably enjoy that Dungeons and Dragons reference. Maybe he got a little bit too into the frequency stuff at a certain point, but he's willing to change his mind, and he'll also fully admit when he rarely gets things wrong. And he's very careful with his language, so that it's not very often at all. I can't tell you how many times he said something and then immediately kind of rephrased it because, oh, that was a little bit too strong. And that is a sign of a really effective and genuine and honest science communicator, where the intention is to communicate as clearly as possible. So, yeah, S tier. Number 5, Ryan Humiston. Now you might say, oh, Ryan Humiston, he's not science-based. I know. The issue is he pretends to be science-based. So he's saying science explained, proved by science. He's strapping electrodes up to himself, that kind of stuff. And so this is just an example of someone who sees that science is popular and it gets you more views. I mean, when you're a moderate or big size channel, the difference between putting science explained and having no parentheses there, I mean, that might be the difference between a 3 million video that pops off and gets you lots of views and subscribers and money and like a 30,000 one, right? Once you're a moderate size channel or bigger, that path of click-through rate, massive difference. And that's why he does it. He doesn't give a shit about science. He just does not care at all. He cares about the money and the fame and the attention, that kind of stuff. Number 6, Eric Bugenhagen. S tier. By the way, this video is sponsored by Boostcamp. So you should be tracking and managing your training. Otherwise, it makes progression quite difficult. You're not going to remember every single set you do. And it is essential to know that for proper progression. And Boostcamp is the best way to do that. Plus, you get access to some of the best hypertrophy and other goal training plans as well. I myself have a bunch of plans up there. Most of them are free. The app as a whole is free as well. Or you can use code GVS for 2 free weeks of premium if you want to try that out. So thank you to Boostcamp for sponsoring this video. All right, number 7, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld. He is, I would say, the most prolific exercise science hypertrophy researcher out there. However, that is not necessarily entirely a good thing. I saw a podcast with him a while back. I think it was on SSD Abel's channel, where he was being questioned about some of the methods or how close people were to failure or something like that. And he eventually said, oh, I just wasn't at the study, so I'm not 100% sure, which props to him for admitting that. But I think sometimes that is an issue. Maybe there's some long distance collaborations. I get that. But if you're pumping out 10, 15, 20 studies a year, I think that maybe could be a negative as well as a positive. He also was criticized about performing the ultrasounds himself in the study and not blinding himself. I don't know how much that actually would impact the results, but I think his response was like, trust me, pro, or something. So I think he's pretty reasonable in the comments. He's very, very active on social media, which, considering how busy he must be, I think that's commendable. I think he's a pretty good source of information. Maybe the volume stuff got a bit out of hand. He seemed to walk that back at some point. So I'm going to give him B tier. I know a lot of people who are really into the science-based side of things, they think he's like, this is the guy. S tier for sure. Or some people who hate science, like, oh, skinny nerd, D tier. I think he's somewhere in the middle, at least for me. Next up, Menno Henselmans. I took his PT course a couple of years ago. I thought it was really, really good. I recommend it. A little bit pricey, but certainly the information was excellent, and I learned a lot. I kind of went into it thinking like, oh, I'll pick up something here and there, but there was a lot of golden tidbits hidden in there, so that was good. I do think that he's kind of taken a page out of the Dr. Mike playbook, posting a lot of rage bait, some studies that are just really not good. And he might say, oh, I'm just conveying the information, but you kind of have to be a little bit selective with the information that you convey. And you'll see where, like, normal study that makes sense, 30 comments. Study that is complete dog shit, 300 comments. So Yeah, I mean, it's a tried and true way of growing your brand, but I also think it does get you some points knocked off. I like him. I think he's good, but for that, I'm going to say B tier. Number 9, Chris Beardsley. I've had a few interactions with him. He posts a lot of infographics, some of which are really, really good. However, he also can be very, very dogmatic in the comments. I've had some interactions with him where I question something. It's just like, no, hypertrophy cannot occur after muscle protein synthesis is done after 48 hours or whatever. I was like, okay, well, wasn't there that Norwegian study on the powerlifters with the front squats and the really high reps where there seemed to be delayed muscle? There seemed to be delayed. No, he's just no. And so he is also a little bit of a do you even lift? Again, not a huge factor, but I think it needs to be taken into account. He also apparently, at one point at least, blocked Menno Henselmans, which I don't think is in the spirit of science communication. Get your ideas out there, debate each other, but if you block someone, that's a bit of a red flag. I'm gonna say C tier on this one. Number 10, the data-driven strength guys. They were both doctors, Zach and Josh. I really, really like these guys. They put out good information, some super long-form content. We're talking 3, 4, 5-hour podcasts. So this is clearly their passion. You don't see the charlatans doing this kind of stuff because, frankly, they can't in a lot of cases. They both lift themselves. They have a lot of practical experience as well. They put out meta-analyses. They have clearly done their homework. They are probably the most underrated channel on this list, I would say. And yeah, I think they've done the work. I'm going to give them S tier on this one. I think they've earned it in the GVS tier list. I'm sure it's a dream come true for them. Yeah, they've done all the work just to get to this point. Yep. All right, number 11, Jeremy Ethier. Now, I've critiqued him in the past. I looked at a video of him doing chest work and was like, how to grow a massive chest. And I think he actually changed the title. I don't know if it was based on my video, but I do believe he changed the title of that video after my criticism. So props there. He also got called out by Greg and actually apologized. He got something wrong. It happens. And hey, if someone says, hey, I messed up, I'll try to do better in the future. Hell yeah, that's awesome. That is fantastic. I love to see that. It's not easy to do sometimes, but to me, that is an absolute win. I think his channel is good for beginners. He did get a little carried away with the posture stuff where he had one posture video that just absolutely blew up. And then every 4 to 6 months after that, does, oh, here's another posture video. And they all did really well because normies love that shit. I'm going to give him B tier. I think he's okay. I don't think he's doing anything phenomenal, but I also don't think he's that bad either. So, B, maybe A, maybe C, probably B. Next up, Dr. Eric Trexler. He certainly knows his stuff. I think what I enjoy most about him, though, is his dry sense of humor. He'll say something on the Iron Culture podcast, and I'll take me a second or two to, oh, okay, there we go. Because he doesn't say like it's going to be a joke, but it's really funny. Certainly knows his stuff. I'm going to give him A tier. Next up, Dr. Milo Wolf. Now, I want to like Milo. I really do. I do enjoy some of his content. I think it's well produced. However, the amount of clickbait or controversy or titles and thumbnails that are a little bit out there is getting to the point where it's hard to take him seriously. Titles and thumbnails, they still matter. Your integrity does not stop at the title and thumbnail. You have to have it there as well. I think some biomechanical flubs as well. You look at the study, the Bayesian curls, definitely some inconsistencies there. You look at him claiming that rack pulls don't work the back. Yes, they absolutely do. Kassem Hansen did good takedowns on both of those. However, I don't really understand the hate that he's gotten on his physique. He's deadlifted 600 for 5 and squatted ass to grass for 40 pounds for 10. And so I think he has a good physique. I don't think that we should have standards so high that like you have to have 19-inch arms to be credible. That's not really how things work. The bigger issue is the titles, the thumbnails, some of the claims, some of the overinterpretations, some of the biomechanical issues here. So I'm going to say C tier. A few months ago, it would have been B tier, honestly. I haven't had it written down as B tier in my notes. But yeah, at this point, it's going to be C tier. And if he keeps doing the Dr. Mike type of shit, it's going to be D tier. But it could be A tier, and who knows? Who knows? Next up, speaking of, Kassem Hansen. So he is certainly not afraid to do takedowns of people either inside or outside of the science-based community, which I think is good. Often there's a lot of like, oh, let's collab. Like, I don't want to say anything bad about him or his study or anything. And so he doesn't, I get the sense he just doesn't give a shit about that kind of stuff, which is very, very refreshing. And man, he really knows his stuff when it comes to biomechanics. I've learned a lot from him. I know he has a course. I haven't taken it. I probably will at some point. But yeah, super on point. S tier. Next up, Dr. Pack. Now, I almost feel like under different circumstances, we would get along really, really well. I enjoy his sense of humor. But he's close friends with Dr. Milo, who, again, I've criticized in the past and will continue to criticize in the future when appropriate and warranted. So he called for me to apologize to Dr. Milo. Nah, I'm good. His content is similar to Milo's, but maybe a little bit less aggressive in terms of the view-seeking type of stuff. He's extremely strong. He squatted approximately 8 billion pounds at 12 years old. I'm going to say B tier. Next up, Lyle McDonald. Now, he has pissed off about half of the people on this tier list, but I think often his criticisms are spot on. And he is not one who's like, oh, let's collab. I don't want to piss anyone off. No, he will tell you exactly how he feels. And I'm not saying he's always right, but he's certainly right more often than not. He's been around the industry forever. He is a true OG. And I will say his takedown of Dr. Mike with Solomon Nelson was absolutely epic. So, yeah, I'm going to say S tier. Not 100% of the time that he's right, but, man, I think the industry needs people like him. Next up, Joe Bennett, also known as Hypertrophy Coach. I've been following him probably 3 or 4 years or so. He's another biomechanics guy. And man, I think his stuff is spot on. Everything is in context. It's nuanced. It is individualized. It's not saying this is the best exercise. No, it's saying maybe you can try this. You can see how it goes. Maybe it depends on your program. It depends on how advanced you are. It's not promising this will get you 34% more muscle growth. Nothing like that. So I think he's spot on. He's got a little bit of science, a little bit of bro. That combination, man, it really just does warm the heart. I'm going to say S tier as well. Next up, Dr. Layne Norton. Now, this one is a little bit of a mixed bag. I do enjoy his content. Human randomized control trials. I do still watch it. I think it's good overall. Generally sound advice. However, I do think that if you are the person who is calling out BS, if that's your whole thing, the person who's debunking the myths, that's great. But you can't go on someone's podcast and they're promoting AG1 or some other BS supplement and just like, here I am, right? Like, oh, you're calling out BS until it's someone you're collabing with. And so, yeah, I think that is a major issue. I do think that shows a lack of integrity. And so people love the guys debunking stuff, but you can't just have this line in the sand where like, oh, I don't talk about this because this guy is my friend and he promotes that. It has to be the same across the board. So I think that's an issue. I will say that he used to promote and sell BCAAs, and then now he no longer does because now there's not as much evidence out about it. I think he's a good source of information overall. Obviously extremely strong, professional natural bodybuilder, great physique. He has the practical experience for sure. But for me, that integrity line in the sand, like you could just sit down on a podcast across from someone and you know they're promoting something that is just garbage and you're just like happy to sort of give the sound bites and stuff. Like to me, that is just disappointing, I would say. So I'm gonna say B tier overall, but without that kind of stuff, he would be much higher. Next up, House of Hypertrophy. I've been following their channel since maybe 5,000 subscribers, 10,000, somewhere around there. There was one video that popped off that had a more provocative title, and it did really, really well. And then after that, a lot of the titles seemed to follow that same route. But it's not as provocative as some other channels, and I think they've done a pretty good job of balancing growth, but also being reasonable and honest. It is sort of anonymous, like you don't have a face, and so there's not really the same cult of personality that some of these bigger channels have. It's nuanced, it's up to date. Again, a little bit of clickbait. The animations, they're not my cup of tea personally, but I'm more there for the information, which I think is overall very, very good. S tier. S tier. It might surprise some people, but I think it's an excellent channel. Next up, Dr. Mike Israetel. And I think I'll lead with this.
So all of that adds up to a 93.5 for Dr. Mike Israetel. I highly encourage you to subscribe to his channel or to search some of his videos. Again, I learn something every time I see him speak. And time invested listening to him is always worth it. I never regret watching any of his videos. He's both educational and entertaining. And yeah, go subscribe to his stuff. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel.
That was 4 years ago. A lot has changed. So we're going to finish this YouTube video story style, but horizontal, because Chocho started playing with the plastic bag, and it's kind of loud. But I think people forget how good of a source of information Dr. Michael Israetel was, and how highly regarded he was, but he just slowly chipped away with that goodwill. And maybe that was the intention all along. Hey, let's build up a brand. Let's make it respectful in the lifting hardcore industry. Let's have a whiteboard. Let's put out good information, concepts, theories. Let's make it practical, nuanced, not dogmatic. And then, oh, now we have an app, and now we have books, and now we're making millions of dollars. Let's drive the growth. Let's put out clickbait. Let's put out hot takes. Let's get people raging against this content. And that's basically exactly what has happened. And I think it's hard to say how much of this was planned or not planned, but certainly they're not a good source of information anymore. And some people are like, the steroids rotted his brain. Well, I think there are plenty of people on anabolics who don't go down this path. So I think a lot of it was just conscious. Just, we want to make it big. We want to become a celebrity. We want to make money. And so they're willing to do stuff that other people are not. It's not that hard to get clicks and views, right? It's just that most people are not willing to do the stuff that it takes to do that. And they have been, and to great success on paper, but I think a lot of people have lost respect for them. So yeah, I've gone from that pretty much wholehearted endorsement and sharing their stuff on my stories to kind of having to apologize for his hot takes that occasionally would happen, to criticizing them openly, and now just saying they're just not a good source of information. They're just not. It's not enough to bat 50% in the fitness industry. Because right now, it's, if I open a Dr. Mike video, you flip a coin and it's like, okay, either shitty or occasionally good and rarely great. So yeah, they have one of the worst ratios out there now. I don't think they're really science-based. Maybe they never were. I mean, there were a few red flags early on, but I didn't think it would get this bad. So I'm still going to say C tier based on the good work they used to do. If you look at content from more than about 3 or so years ago, it's probably okay. But recently it's been mostly D tier stuff. So overall, I'm going to say C tier. And the reality is there is a deep, deep rot in the evidence-based community. And everyone knows it. The people who are the rot, they know it. The people who are not the rot, they know it. But no one wants to rock the boat. No one wants to call it out. Everyone wants to collaborate. Everyone wants to build their channel. And so
it's a big club, and you ain't in it.
There are very, very few people out there who are actually calling out misinformation. Maybe they'll call out misinformation from some people, but not all. They'll go the Layne route. When was the last time you heard Layne criticize Mike Israetel? Ever? I don't know. Like, there's just so much content there for him, but he doesn't take it because maybe there's some unspoken or spoken agreement. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that actually actively pisses me off. And I see it all the time. Or they'll call it out, but then afterwards, maybe they have debate. They both grow their channels from it. But then afterwards, it's all cool, bro. Like, if someone is putting out misinformation or misrepresenting studies consistently, it cannot be all cool, bro. Like, they need to be shut the fuck down, or at least just stop collabing with them. Anyway, that is the rant for the video over. Next up, Greg Nuckols. Now, I've followed his stuff since the strength theory days. He does a lot of long-form written content. A lot of the stuff in the fitness industry is just trickling down from the stuff that he writes. So he does a lot of really, really groundbreaking stuff. A lot of the content in the fitness industry, it's kind of regurgitating what other people do. It's not actually doing or thinking of anything new. But his stuff, it is actually unique. His Barbalho takedown was pretty darn epic. I think they threatened to sue him. I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, he's doing a lot of really, really good work. Very, very nuanced. He definitely has a bro side as well, which I think is excellent. He once said, "Oh, I'm not going to keep reps in reserve on rear delt raises. I will never ever do that." I'm like, yes, that's what's up. He squatted 750, I believe, and bench pressed a ton before it was cool to do it. And so yeah, it's a great source of information. Very, very nuanced, super easy S tier. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Chris Barakat. He is a professional bodybuilder, big arms. I think he puts out overall good information. I haven't followed him for a super long time, but I think he's a very, very solid person to follow. And let's say A tier. I also want to shout out Jonathan Warren, another biomechanics guy who I've learned a lot from, especially with the torso musculature, the chest, the lats, and keeping everything, all the tension where you want it. Initially, I didn't include him because I wasn't sure if science-based is like the right descriptor, but I thought I'd at least give him a mention. Definitely S tier in my book. Gonna toss in a couple of bonus ones. Yeah, the list was not long enough. So first up, we got T and F. I'm going to put him in A tier. I think he's generally good. I haven't followed him for a ton of time. For me to get an S tier, you got to be nailing it for a really long period of time, years and years. And I just haven't followed him long enough to get an S tier. I do get the vibe that some of his stuff is sort of meant to incite people as a little bit of rage bait, but he's also right. I think there's a difference between posting something wrong that's rage bait and posting something that's right, but you word it in a way that pisses people off. And so he does more of the latter. I think he's a good source of information. We definitely don't see eye to eye on some stuff. Maybe to a certain extent volume, certainly rep range. But yeah, overall good source of information. I'm going to put him to A tier along with Dr. Andy Galpin. I think he's a doctor. I got to get better at searching if people are doctors or not. I think he's also a good source of information. Again, I haven't followed him for a really long time. I believe he's also been on the Huberman Lab podcast, but I won't hold that against him too much. Especially he's not like a BS caller outer guy. So yeah, overall, definitely good people to follow. Yeah, that is the list. And if your favorite science-based content creator is not on the list, either I forgot about them, it happens, I'm not omniscient, or I don't know about them, that's what omniscient means. Or maybe I thought about them, but I didn't really consider them to be science-based. There's not like a fixed definition of what science-based is or isn't. So all in all, it's just my opinion. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Might change my opinion, might not, we'll see. But yeah, hope you liked the video. Check out my books if you want to know a lot more about how to properly program your hypertrophy training specifically. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Boom.